Hey guys, what's going on? It's Salvage here, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man 2 and the darker tone that is going to be presented in this game. Now, Brian Interhart decided to make an interview or do an interview with Eurogamer as a bunch of different tidbits and information that we have for this game, and honestly, it's very, very exciting. Now, of course, they start off the interview by talking about how Peter Parker's a little bit less quippy, a lot more frustrated and snappy, and how the symbiote gives off very different vibes than it did in the first game. Interhart says whether it's Kraven, which we confirmed in the beginning of the sequence, and obviously we showed Venom when we first announced the game, and now with the symbiote and Pete being bonded with the symbiote, there's naturally going to be some darker elements to the story, Interhart says. That's just being respectful to those characters and what they bring to the overall experience. Now, that seems very, very nice, because it seems like they're going to be trying to stick to as accurate of a depiction to, of course, Peter, the symbiote, Venom, and Kraven as possible. You know, they did very good in the first game. They took some liberations with, of course, their own characters, but for the most part, most of the characters stayed faithful to what they were in the comics and what most people kind of already knew about them in the first place. So I think that they're going to be doing the same thing here, and of course, that darker element always comes with Venom. Venom is a very, very dark character that, I mean, if you go throughout the character storylines, I mean, he has an incredible amount of dark stories in this whole universe, or at least in the comics universe. So I definitely recommend going in there and seeing all the different things, because it's very hard to mention them here without being censored and demonetized. Of course, they keep going and saying how there is going to be a lighter tone. It's not going to just be all dark and it's just going to be super, you know, heavy and moody, you know, and I think that that's kind of expected to be that. They were explaining that as well, saying what we talked about a lot is whether it's Marvel Spider-Man or Miles Morales, our games are all about still having heart and humor. It's really about finding that balance between those dark themes and characters, but also delivering that very human story where there's a lot of heart and humor. I think that's what was tricky, but I do think we found a nice balance at the end of the day. I think you saw that in the gameplay reveal. We have the moments with Genki and Miles and the Falcon that he's trailing behind, the Talon drone, and then at the very end you get that line about Peter changing and Miles saying, you know, he's never like that, right? So we have those human elements, but on the serious side of where we see the symbiote affecting Peter, but also on the lighter hearted side. Of course, they reiterate how the writers are doing a great job trying to balance that light and darkness, and you know, it's very interesting to see how they're going to try to do that, because the first game was incredibly light. I would say there's maybe 3 dark moments throughout that whole first game. That's the suicide bombing. That's a pretty dark moment. I'm surprised they even got away with that. I can't even lie, it's a legit suicide bombing. The second one would be, you know, the whole pandemic that happens in New York, basically killing a bunch of people, and then May dying. So there's a bunch of dark things that happen in that first game, but most of it is very lighthearted. Most of it, I'm not saying it's not to be taken serious, but in this game, they can definitely take that gap and close it significantly and make it a lot more 50-50. And I'm excited to see how they would do that. Now, they actually go back to talk about how Yuri Lowenthal has likened it to, of course, addiction, Peter being caught up in the symbiote. And, of course, I was about to say Interhart iterates, and you know how hard that is to say. Like, I didn't even really think about it. Brian Interhart iterates. Try to say that 3 times. He says that Yuri is right. The theme of addiction is prevalent, especially because of the symbiote. We did a lot of research, not only on the previous stories with the symbiote, but also just looking at when Peter is bonded. What can that feel like? Not to go into too many things about how it plays into the narrative, but we want to treat it very seriously, and I like that. I like that they're not going to just treat, you know, the symbiote as a one-off joke or, you know, type of like 30-minute thing. They're gonna really treat it as Peter going through it and kind of messing up some of his relationships. He of course he goes on and says Yuri will forever be my favorite Peter Parker, or whoever be my Peter Parker. You know, when I hear Spider-Man, I hear his voice. That's how well he's done as Peter. So I think that it could be pretty jarring to hear him talk like that, like he does in the gameplay reveal. It's very true. I think a lot of people are calling that badass and whatnot, that moment in the gameplay trailer where he's like, oh, Kraven wishes that he'll never come to New York. Like, I think that's honestly a little bit disturbing. Like, that's really fucked up and really messed up in the whole grand scheme of things in context. So I think that when you really look at this Spider-Man, You know, a lot of people call this Spider-Man a happy-go-lucky Spider-Man that hasn't gone through any pain or trauma besides Aunt May. And that's relatively true. So for him to be really acting like he's just going through the worst possible experience of his life right now with this, symbiote to this type of addiction, it's very exciting. And I can't wait to see how that's going to play out. And I hope more people actually kind of take that as, of course, a disturbing thing and not like a really badass thing, because it's not badass. It's very, very terrifying and a little bit messed up, too, that he's going to ruin his relationships because of this thing. He says, so it's about really playing into those themes of addiction, how that can impact somebody's personality, impact the people around them. You're going to see that it's not just how it's impacting Peter on his own, but also those close to him. You're going to see that play out throughout the game. Now, of course, they have a bunch of things saying that they had to check off a bunch of things for the reveal, or check off a bunch of things so people will be happy and whatnot. They wanted to showcase a darker reveal, and they said that that was kind of partly the case. They wanted to show that that was part of the case of the game, but they wanted to show that there was 2 Spider-Man in this game as well, saying it's a number 2 on the box because of the 2 Spider-Men. It's not just because it's a sequel. We wanted to make sure that we showed off this game does feature 2 Spider-Men, each with their own story, but with a bigger story as well. See, now that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that Miles has his own thing. He has his own story. It's not just Peter. I want it to be Miles as well. I want him to have his own thing. I'm glad he kind of confirmed that there. I know that that's probably already kind of something that people would assume, but a lot of people are just saying, I wish we have the ability to only be Peter. I've seen that comment like 15 times, dude. And that shit's so annoying because Miles is a part of this story too. He's a part of this universe and has to be actually explored. So I'm really happy that they're not just going to put Miles in the backseat of the story and they're going to make him one of the Spider-Men. He is one of the Spider-Man. He's not just Miles. Oh, it's Miles in the background. No, he's a Spider-Man too. So we have to respect that. Ultimately, the game's river chase checked all the boxes, but there's obviously more to show before we ship, they tease. I'm very excited. They still got a bunch of stuff that they're going to show off. And now they go into talking about how, of course, this is not the final version of the game. It's something that's still in progress, something that's still being worked on. They even said we're always looking to improve the game. Everything we will continue to get better and better, whether it's performance, whether it's fidelity, whether it's our gameplay, Interheart tells us. Our goal is obviously make a very polished, stable experience when we ship the game. That also, at the end of the day, takes advantage of what the PS5 hardware can do. That's exciting. I think you saw a lot of that in the gameplay reveal, from the hero switching to the sense of speed and traversal. We're going to continue to work on until our project director, Janet, says, Brian, Ryan, stop working on the game. That's great. See, the game is not done yet. A lot of people are saying that, oh, they're not going to finish. It's already gold. It's already ready. They're going to post it up already. Like, no, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. This isn't something that's going to be, taken lightly. They want to get this to be as the best game possible. And I think the first 2 games were very polished. I can't even remember any bugs going on there, so I'm very excited to see what happens. Of course, they go into talking about the PS5 and how they're really building it up. They're really cranking that up. You build up that speed through swinging. Swinging is always the core of our traversal, but then being able to add on the web wings, you get a different perspective from that. Just traversing the open world into the new burrows, the web wings really help with that, as well as the wind tunnels that you can go through. They really crank up your speed, and that's something that the PS5 enables, and it's really, really cool traversal experience. See, oh man, that's so exciting. While we're delivering a sequel, we're looking to improve all elements, whether it's traversal, combat, or mission design. I think the gameplay reveal is a good example of how we want to elevate it. It's a big blockbuster moment. We have Peter starting out in Queens, quickly switching to Miles in the city, then web swinging and slingshotting over to Harlem, switching back and forth along the East River. I think it's about just upping everything we possibly can and taking advantage of the hardware. Things like moving at speeds that we weren't moving at before and having all these different tricks. So that's basically it. The interview ends it off with him telling them about his own experience about playing Marvel Spider-Man and how he thanks him for kind of making it more kid-friendly, which I like. One thing that I have to point out too is that they say on the side here how it's like they had a pro-cop movement thing, but the main thing that I want to point out is the surveillance towers. They're saying also another talking point of the game was the use of surveillance towers to on-fog its map. Interheart says that they're not adding the towers in this next game, so either The map is fully open. I think Miles Morales said that, if I'm not mistaken. Or they're gonna find some other way to fog up the map, or maybe they're just not gonna do that at all. I think that's very interesting, and that's a good little gameplay tidbit that they're not gonna put in there. And I'm very excited to see how that kind of like plays into the gameplay in the map. So I'm very excited for this game. I love everything that's in this game. Obviously, they're gonna give us the best experience possible. The main things to point out here is, of course, how they're still working on the game. There's still, of course, polishing that needs to be done, and it's not just the final product that we saw in the demo from the showcase. Kind of how the PS5 is, you know, giving us a little bit better of an experience so we can have a better polished experience, and how, of course, this game is a much darker tone because of Kraven, because of course Venom, and because of Symbiote and Peter as well. And I think that that's going to be a very dark aspect of the game, and I can't wait to see how they play it off in this game. So tell me what you guys think in the comments below, and subscribe for more videos in the future.